Holy shit! Wow. Pretty irritating I missed point 0.8 there, but that is the first time I've hit that solo bigger squeeze. And I got the last act. What the fuck? That's so crazy. I'm just fighting the disappointment that I missed point 0.8, but I'm pretty sure I cut off a couple ticks on that last blue of phrase 1. Let me just compare my ticks after phrase 2 from the bigger squeeze path. So I didn't drop any past that second phrase, so I really can't be too mad at this. I guess the only thing really within my control that cost me point 0.8 there, I say within my control with an asterisk, just like what's reasonable in terms of like those solo sustains, which are damn near impossible to really keep track of and optimize. But yeah, Act 3, I stopped trying to like optimize that front end with extended A window because I just kept red flaming it. And to get enough attempts at this solo bigger squeeze act, I just had to stop fucking with it. And it looks like I was 1 frame away from ticks. But I really shouldn't be complaining. The fact that I again got that last act first run with the solo act is crazy. I actually had like 3 spare star power frames on that last act too, so my whammy must have been pretty solid. And as for that solo act, trying to use extended hit window on that is like a joke. It is just so incredibly difficult to not miss the yellow behind that blue front end, trying to abuse any extended hit window frames there. This run, my front end looked, it had to be frame perfect without extended hit window. And even with what I felt like was very solid whammy, star power ended on the frame I hit the back end, so definitely not an easy solo squeeze, and again, just very surprised and thankful I hit that last act. First run getting that. Okay, I have no idea what happened, but I got point 0.8. What was that shit, dude? I thought I had decent ticks coming out of Act 3. Okay, no, I only got a couple ticks on Act 3. Must have screwed up the whammy again somewhere. Again, just like the 794 run, I didn't drop any after the solo, so I really can't complain about this. Um, I actually think this was pretty much an identical run, besides getting 2 ticks off the third act, which is, funny enough, what I kind of loathed about that run was not getting any ticks there cost me point 0.8. That's kind of crazy that I essentially duplicated that run. Although with a big asterisk in that I changed the act spot back to the green where I activated the first time I did this song in 2024. And I was really curious about that solo act, how the frames played out given those 2 act spots. And so I did some TAS work on this in GH2 Deluxe, and both act spots have the same frame data for that bear squeeze act. There was 1 frame of difference in the path act's favor on the triplet for the upper bound act, but that act was frame perfect, and I used a buffered whammy on the first sustain of phrase 1, which I'm pretty sure isn't possible on Xbox. So it's just one of those acts that's like completely up in the air whether it's even possible. With that front end execution, abusing max extended hit window frames, like I said in the first run, just a complete joke. But both those act spots having the same frame data for the bigger squeeze act kind of made it a no-brainer to adjust it back to the green, because you can actually abuse extended hit window frames there. I figured that act spot would be easier than even the non-extended hit window front end on the path act on the triplet, but no, it's definitely harder because it's just incredibly easy, even though there's such a big space between that front end green and the triplet. The dynamic hit window on that blue note is so small that I still just missed on the following yellow, the second note in the triplets, almost every run. Now, it's probably something I could have grinded out with enough muscle memory and experience, but yeah, that front end is still difficult to abuse extended hit window on, even with this adjustment. Another potential benefit of it, your mileage may vary here, but being able to just pull off for the back end can make that a little more precise or in your favor to execute. On a trill pattern that slow, it's not really something I value, and I'm not really sure how helpful it is. But yeah, it was completely the front end change why I made that adjustment back. And I've hit that solo act many times. Like, at this point, I'm probably getting it more often than not, which is the only reason I stayed going with this, to hopefully get a better tick run, but at least 0.8 like I got here. So as for the other task findings, I was curious about the first act, if you could delay that to the following green and then get the whole blue sustain in and hit the blue at the end of that. That didn't end up being possible. It was a few frames away, and then I tried adjusting it back to the orange sustain 4 notes after the path act, and that has a max dynamic hit window, so 7 frames, and that act would end on the blue sustain after the path act ends, getting in that full blue sustain. And that was actually really close. It was like 1 frame away, I'm pretty sure. But also that was using buffered whammy on the yellow, so very likely not possible even with hardware bias. And even if it was, it would not be worth stonewalling yourself behind a frame perfect whammy act like that for a handful of ticks. I mean, it probably would be worth a lot, but trying to execute the rest of this path after, like, you know, good luck, I guess, all I can say. The third act upper bound, I'm pretty sure I used buffered whammy multiple times during that, and it was still frame perfect. So, yeah, that's almost certainly not possible. But the biggest thing I was curious about was the last act, nearly ideal and upper bound. They're worked the same. The path is changed for some reason between the two. It's reminds me of the laid to rest second act, and there's a specific reason for that aside from just the two paths having a different act spot yet being worth the same. The upper bound act in TAS was a frame more lenient, 5 frames instead of 4, but it's specifically phrase 1 is just so fucked up that, like, I don't even know if I got the yellow before the upper bound back end in on any of these tries. I didn't throw that many attempts at it. I obviously wasn't going to try it on a run that I at least thought my ticks were decent and hit the solo squeeze. It was pretty much just dead runs that I was trying it, but yeah, just did not get close at all there. The frame bleed on that first phrase is just insane. So 99% chance I will not be getting that. And, considering I got 0.8 here, I can't imagine grinding this out for any more ticks. Ticks aren't great, but the whammy for that solo act and the last act again on phrase 1 is just such a crapshoot in the way that you can drop ticks maintaining early whammy. So probably wasn't worth doing, but at least I'm a lot more satisfied with this.